Hello and welcome. I am Patrick Clore. I'm the Director of Customer Marketing at the Education and Nonprofit Division of Community Brands here, and we are thrilled to have all of you joining us today. Today is episode 11 of our 12-part Fundraising Success Blueprint series. We've got the penultimate episode today, where our hope is to go in depth on 12 specific areas of the fundraising realm to not only address each specific topic, but also by the end, have a true blueprint that folks can follow as it pertains to optimizing their fundraising goals. And we are big believers that people don't want to hear from us, especially me. Rather, they would like to hear from experts and peers in the development space. And today we are thrilled to be joined by three amazing women who have graciously given up their time in order to spread their knowledge. So I'm happy to introduce and welcome Ala Leventhal, who is a Senior Customer Success Manager at GiveSmart, Betty Smith from the Assistance League Huntington Beach, and Caitlin Mulo from the American Liver Foundation. So ladies, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us. I appreciate it.
It's going to be fun. And to start us off, Betty and then Caitlin, could each of you kind of just introduce yourself a little bit and your roles within the particular organizations you guys are a part of?
Okay, I guess I'll go first. I'm the technical leader of the technical department at the Huntington Beach Assistance League. I am in charge of the database of all of our members. And of course I do GiveSmart and any other things that come up technically that they need help on.
Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin Mulo. I am one of the national managers of events at the American Liver Foundation. I am, along with my colleagues, responsible for designing, planning, and implementing all of our virtual and hopefully soon to be in-person events for the nonprofit. I help to cover events from the East Coast to the West Coast and everywhere in between, and use systems and softwares such as GiveSmart to help with our auction and things like that for our event.
Perfect. We're going to have Ala introduce herself a little in depth in a second, so don't think she got missed out. But a true all-star cast, and we appreciate you all joining us here today. And we know we've had some folks send in some questions in advance that we've already got slotted into the conversation, but wanted to make sure that everybody knows that please send in questions through the Q&A portion. The fifth member of our team behind the scenes is Susanna, who is going to be fielding all of those and send them over. So you can send in as many as you like, so keep them coming early and often, and we'll be taking a look at that. As well as in the chat, we'll be sharing some of the different resources and campaign examples that we'll cover here on the call. But as a part of the follow-up you'll get after the fact, there will be a full recording of this conversation as well as all the links. So if you have to drop off or something, please don't think that you're going to miss out. And to optimize the viewing experience here today, the most common pieces of feedback we get from folks are to, where possible, use the gallery mode so you can see everybody's smiling faces. And then again, if you do have a question, to put that in the Q&A section and keep a look for the chat out as well. So in terms of what we're going to cover here today is going in depth into kind of the item distribution and auction event closeouts. So starting with closing time and the value of over communication, talking about transaction fees as a revenue source, as well as kind of bulk checking folks out. And then looking at item distribution and pickup, the expectation settings, how things have changed based upon the virtual landscape, and now examining hybrid and going back in person, as well as the kind of considerations for pickup versus shipping, and then getting into a little bit of the post-event communications side of things as well. And with that, we will start off with a poll that we've been doing over the past couple of weeks, which is just to get a sense of what does 2021 look like for all of you listening here today. So are talking in your organizations looking at exclusively virtual campaigns, hybrids, only in person, a mix of that? And Ala, while folks are weighing in, could you just talk us through a little bit kind of your day-to-day role as a customer success manager and some of the things that you're seeing in terms of trends at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a senior customer success manager here at GiveSmart, and in my day-to-day, I engage with nonprofits all over the country to support their fundraising efforts. So, by learning about their mission, goals, and needs, my most important goal is to hear about some of the challenges that you're having and trying to get creative on how we can leverage GiveSmart to help fix that in some way or make it easier. I see definitely one of my favorite questions throughout the day is what's new with GiftSmart, and for the most part, I'll usually have an answer for my clients and a new fix that makes fundraising much smoother and more enjoyable. So that's typically what I'll see, what I'll experience.
Ala puts the fun in fundraising. She's too humble to say. So we will take a look here at the polls we have on screen. And what I think is great is this is kind of the same trend line that we've seen over the past couple of weeks as, vaccine rollouts and things of that nature take place. That's kind of a combination of some live and some virtual. And I think what is great is pretty much for everybody in each of these boxes, there's some cool things that Betty and Caitlin have done, as well as that Ala has shared with us that a lot of organizations are due. So with that, we will jump back in here. And, as we get into the topic for today, once again, our goal with this series has been twofold: to provide in-depth commentary from peers throughout the development space to allow you to kind of pick and choose the options and things that are most relevant to either issues or ideas you're trying to find within your organization. But then also, when complete, to have a toolkit that if you look at it, what type of campaign should we do? Is this something that's going to be multiple times through the year? Or is it a one-time only usage? And then how do we get a page stood up? How do we get people there? How do we sell tickets? So today we kind of, for this penultimate episode, we've got one more very exciting episode next week. But in terms of the actual end of an auction or event, it represents today here closing time, which inevitably, as we were getting ready for today, led us to weave in this song, because anytime you can play closing time on a fundraising webinar, it seems like something that one should just always do. And we will share this link into the chat as well. But to get us back on course here, the first kind of set of questions that are some that audience members have sent in, so please again keep those in, is talking about closing things out. The first question, I'll throw it out to any of the three of you, but really, how has the past year changed the process of closing out an auction or an event, with things being virtual? And, is that something that there's excitement now of maybe being able to go back in person, or is it, hey, wait, we learned a few things, we're excited to keep those trends going forward? So I don't know if anybody wants to start off with their experience overall.
I can start out. So we used to host, for our examples, we used to host multiple events across the US, and every chapter or division kind of operated differently. But for us, one of the advantages that we've found with moving to virtual is what we've done is just kind of like a bulk checkout. So it allows us to go ahead and run credit cards as soon as we've closed out our auction for the night. It's a simple one-step process, and I know we'll kind of get into that a little bit further into the program, but it was just easier for us doing it on the virtual side because we didn't have any in-person staff. Obviously, we were the in-person staff for these events. So to do the bulk checkout just made it easier on our end, and something we've kind of learned now in this virtual world.
Same thing. We use the auto close. Oops, did I get that back? Okay, auto closeout. And it works a lot easier because it's processed real quick, and then we can just go on. But even this time we had the instant items selling afterwards, so we had to check a little bit on that. But the auto closeout is the best.
And to an advantage of it, similar to like you'd have in an in-person event, but with the virtuals, you were always able to find if there was a credit card error right then, and you still had the audience members' attention while they were kind of closing out the event or something else, to just either send them a message or use one of the automated prompts in the system to just say, hey, there was a credit card error. Please either go back in and fix that or give me a call and we can kind of work through that process together. So instead of having to manually go through one by one, and depending on the size of your event, that could take quite some time. So just using the bulk process to do that was extremely helpful, and definitely something that I would recommend to use moving forward, and definitely will keep with me when we do go back to in-person events.
Definitely.
That is awesome. And we had somebody sent a question in, I think talking about the kind of auto close side of things. So Betty and then Ala, if you want to jump in and add to it, the kind of the two-part question. The first part is, what exactly is the auto close side of it? And then the second part being, is that something you communicated to guests ahead of time overall?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I can start with the auto close versus the manual in GiveSmart. So the auto close is you set a time on the back end, and then as soon as that time passes, the auction closes, everyone has their balances. When we were, some people are physically at events, they don't know the exact time that their program will end. So they would depend on a manual close, meaning, you say there's about 15 minutes left in the auction, and you would close it at that point, or it might be connected to a countdown. So that was a person was probably doing that, whether it's an admin or a GiveSmart, remote specialist. So that's where that manual close comes in. But the automatic is you put in the time, make sure you don't, if you're extending the auction, you definitely have to make sure to go back in and change that. With the manual close, you have the flexibility of like closing it when you are ready.
That's correct, because before when we had a, in live, it took 2 of us to close out at the end of the day, and sometimes more than that because we had so many attendees. But with the virtual, it's so much easier with the auto close.
Mm-hmm.
That is awesome. And I know I think what's cool about that is that based on the medium, whether it is in person or virtual or stuff, that there's kind of best of both breeds to be able to leverage. And so I'm curious, in terms of communicating and really over communicating, I know that's a topic we'll kind of build on throughout the call today, is, did you guys find yourself sending, whether it's text messages, emails, social posts, emails, things of that nature, communicating more with your constituents, in some of these virtual efforts than maybe you would have done in person, where obviously the MC serves as the notifier more often than not? So I'm curious how the kind of active engagement with people, both in the build-up and in the moments, if that was different strategies that you guys used over the past year than maybe before, or pretty much the same.
We had one person that we had just sending out text messages, and we were kind of told that it's best not to send a lot. We tried to keep it to 2 a day, and we had some deals of the day each day at different times. So a text message would go out about that, or a text message would go out. We still have some of these great items available, point them out, but we kept it down to about 2 a day.
And for us, I think in the virtual world, we tended to over communicate, and it was just the nature of kind of our event. People were focusing, we did a culinary cook along, so we had people kind of focusing on that aspect of it. We did time it when there were lulls in the program. So that's when we would have the messages drafted already in the messaging center. So when we knew there was going to be a lull, we had one of our staff members just clicking the send button. And in the virtual world, like I said, we tended to over communicate, and it was solely because we didn't have the ability to have that MC kind of saying night of, you have that 15 minutes remaining, 20 minutes remaining. So we were sending those communications, and then post event as well, we were trying to drive people back to the websites with remaining items or to make final donations or things like that. But the texting feature is great because everyone always has their phones on them now, whether it's your cell phone, your Apple Watch, whatever, whatever method you have. So people were constantly getting those reminders.
No, that's great. And a question in that vein I'm curious to ask is people in each organization, in each event obviously is unique to itself, but hey, I want to close some things at 8 o'clock, other things at 8:30 and 9 in person, the ability to communicate that and have it be one way versus virtual. Obviously the medium makes it a little bit different. And so I'm curious if in that regard, did either of your organizations or Ala, anything you've seen from other folks, did that change that, hey, you know what, now everything closed at a hard 10 o'clock because that was the easiest, or no, we were still able to, do things in different kind of stages or waves at all?
Yeah, I don't mind jumping in on that to go first. So when we were in person, we definitely kind of had staggered close times, and that was solely because we had some attendees that either needed to leave early or needed to check out at a certain point. And we knew that kind of either going into it or towards the end of the night, they came up to us and said, I need to leave. What items did I win? So when we were doing in-person events, we did not do, like I had mentioned earlier, the charging of all cards. We would kind of stagger closing with the virtual because we don't really have that pressure of attendees kind of waiting and needing to be checked out. For us, we just waited until the end of the program and then did that.
That's basically what we did too, but we did have a timetable that we were trying to be very close to the end on the regular ones, but virtual, yeah, close it out. It's ready to start bagging them up.
So I definitely want to hop in here in terms of like what I've seen my clients do and what's worked best for them. So I definitely understand that, you know, having staggering auction close times does maybe make an auction sound more interesting, but I've actually taken a look and I have not been able to put together data that like closing a group of items first versus later makes much of a difference unless you're talking about like a super silent or premier, like really, really exclusive items. So I always try to keep it simple. So I like, if you can keep the bidding for as long as possible throughout the night and try to keep people in their seats. You know, I like to remind my clients that like you get to set the tone of the schedule. So if you say, nope, the auction is closing at 9:30 after the program, that's a little bit more incentive for people to like stay in their seats, pay attention to the program, whether it's in person or virtual. So that's always my recommendation, to like let it keep going, let it be the last thing, because it gives you a lot more time and flexibility for fundraising elements to flow into each other.
And it gets those last minute bids in for people that are trying to one up each other on that.
Exactly. That's when we see the most activity is at the end. So once the program is over, you can like put up like the auction bids display, and that's really when you can give it, you know, that final push.
And we also had the time clock that ran across the top, and you know, they'd be checking that, and they could see if they could sneak in at the very end.
Yeah, that's why we have to push the auto bid, which is so important, especially at the last minute. If you do not want to miss out on your item, put in an auto bid. If you're outbid, then you can still put in another one.
Yeah.
That is the one. There's a lot of things of the virtual landscape that have been fun to see people do, but missing the in-person side. I feel like the checkout represents both the positive and the negatives that I'm excited to see come back, which is near the end, the people, I won, I beat you, or you look like the anticipation, especially the like sniper who comes in at the last second and puts the thing in. And so that elation, I think will be fun to watch come back. But then the checkout is you could put on a great program, but the last 5 minutes, if somebody stands in line a second more than they want to, that's all they're going to remember. If one person, it took them 10 seconds and they tell somebody it's, you could have done everything else perfectly, but somehow in the wrap-up meeting, that'll be the one thing. So it's fun as we go. And I know, you know, talking about closing stuff up and reconciling, Betty, you'd mentioned something the other day that we see a lot of people do, which is, you know, whether it's funds raised offline, kind of outside of the system, or, you know, hey, we're going to have a display screen, a thermometer up. And so we want to put, same way in the ballroom that a plant donation and a plant donor is used to kind of get things going, that, hey, you would put in kind of an anonymous donation to help stir people in the right direction, which I know we have a lot of folks do. And I've always been curious, when it comes to now everything is done, for reconciling or just looking at the information, do you back that? Would you go in and delete that? You know, so hey, now that I want to look at the reports or things like that. I've always been curious just to ask, because I know everybody does it differently. So I didn't know when you guys have done that, or Caitlin, Al, if you've seen similar things, if that's, we'll put it in so it goes, and then when the night ends and we want to look at the totals, we'll delete kind of the plant, so to say. Or if it's just, hey, we know it's not real, so we just kind of leave it in there. And I'm sure each group is a little different.
No, and it wasn't a plant. We actually had it set up on our website, and it was running. So the money that came from that, I put in as anonymous. And of course, I left it there. No, we would never add money that wasn't real money. We've never done that.
So, and I know we kind of do the same thing. We use a couple different platforms in order for our websites to operate and for our events to operate the way that we need them to. So we've kind of done the opposite with that, where we know we have like a $5,000 donor that wants this to be recognized on our, we call it Fund the Mission, but our donations that have come in. So we will put them in. We obviously know all of their information ahead of time. We know they may not be sitting in the room night of. So we'll put it in so it shows up on our accounts. And then when we go to pull reports at the end of the night, we will go in and either back it out or make sure when we're pulling reports internally, we exclude that money so we're not double counting it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the most important part, is that you either know that you've put it in or you make sure to remove it later, because we do have like a lot of reports that you can pull, and you know, whether it's a plan or a bulk, it's kind of like treated the same in the report. So when you're kind of like importing into your CRM, knowing that that, you know, big chunk was kind of, you know, from your website or, you know, from something that was already budgeted for. So I definitely think that that's a good step. As long as you know where the funds come from when you guys look at your reports, that's the most important. But since you can pull customer reports from GiftSmart, we do recommend to keep it as accurate as possible.
That was great. And then a few questions are coming in. We appreciate keep sending them in. That I think are good now before we kind of move into some other things, is talking about the silent auction and keeping it open and things like that. Is if keeping the auction open during the program, do you find that that distracts from the program? Which is a question I think people ask a lot, you know, in terms of trying to find the best way. And so I'm curious, you know, for the three of you, you know, what thoughts or comments you have in terms of closing it before the program, so that's the sole focus, or if it's, hey, leave it open throughout and maybe leave a little bit buffer time on the end, or kind of what thoughts you all have in that regard.
Okay.
I'm happy to start. So I think we have to remember that our guests can definitely multitask in a moment. And if we're gonna have them be on their phone, I want it to be because they're fundraising for you all. So I know that during the appeal, kind of the thought is that people come in with an amount in their mind that they want to donate, and they kind of like keep track of the silent auction. But the reality is until you close the silent auction, you don't really know how much you purchased in silent auction items, and you might do higher or lower. So I think of it as like keeping a tab, and like when you're not seeing like the dollar for dollar, you're kind of separating your silent auction budget versus your paddle raise. So I think it's totally fine to have both happen at the same time. I think it's important that you have fundraising activities that appeal to all different types of donors, whether they want to, you know, donate, you know, pay $10,000 for a live auction. You might have someone that, you know, prefers to do that through a raffle. So I think keeping the options open for your guests is important. And also during a live auction, we have to remember that it's 10 to 20% of the room that's actively participating. So all the ones that are watching, that's a great time for them to check in on the silent auction where those items might be more accessible. So I think, you know, letting your guests have all the options is totally doable.
We always leave it all open. We don't close it down. We always.
Yeah. And I think it also depends on the type of event that you're doing. If it's something where, you know, your participants need their full attention to the program, then you might be better off either kind of shutting it down in between and leaving it open pre and post like demonstrations. But for us, we found, so prior to us even using a mobile bidding software, we were doing like paper bids, like very old school paper bidding. And our, you know, participants were getting away from the table, missing parts of the program because they were running back to the other room to bid. So moving over to the bidding platform at least allowed them to stay in the room, still be hearing the program, but also have the ability to bid on their phones, to be making donations if and when our appeals appealed to them to do that. And also what I definitely would recommend is the earlier you can post all of your items and get your campaign up and running on the website, the better, because the earlier you promote, the earlier you know what you're making for money and what items are selling. So before you even, you know, walk into your campaign day of, you can use the reports tab, which is an awesome feature to see, you know, I've already made going into my event a couple $100 on these items, or I've made, you know, X number in donations already.
Revenue on hand before is always one of the most beautiful things that exists. And the I'll always use myself as the example of to make it through this call every week in 1 hour undistracted takes a lot of self-restraint. So people will be on their phones no matter what, and might as well have them doing something that goes to the organization as well. It was another organization who gave when they were designing their program, they went in and looked at the bid history from years prior, and they had run multiple events to find out when is the right time to close it. And so obviously, again, I think, Kelly set up because each event is going to be unique. I would recommend, if you're going to have a dinner and dancing that involves an open bar, maybe close it before people hit the dance floor, because your saturation point at that point probably goes up a little bit. I think that is good. And then kind of in this realm and talking about, I think especially build on the revenue comment, Ala, came across some awesome trends that we wanted to share with folks here. In particular, talking about the transaction fees. So Ala, I will toss it over to you for kind of this in the next slide, some best practice.
Perfect. So if I had to be straightforward about my best practice for transaction fees is at least make it optional for your guests. So what this does is that it will pass on the fee to your guests should they opt into it whenever they're using their credit card. So I think that if you go back and look at the numbers for like clients that used it and clients that didn't, we'll see that over the years, we've really kind of seen a major increase in the amount of funds raised through just transaction fees alone. And this is really a great way to encourage your guests to give you 100% of their contribution. And later on, when we talk about over communication, I think over communication about the fees that you as an organization pay because of credit cards is important and relevant. And so the great part about making it optional is if they want to, they can. If they don't want to, they don't have to. And of course, that does not apply to checks or any other sort of payment. And some of the things that we've seen is depending on how much you process in credit card transactions, you could potentially make back the fee of the technology on transaction fees alone. But the important part is to enable it and at least ask. And then just moving through. So one thing that we have as well is the bulk closeout feature. So we've updated this to where you can change the threshold of how much, what you want to charge. So it used to be 1,000, but now you can decide whether it's 500 or 10,000. And I will typically talk my clients through a cadence of like when they're going to bulk close out. So one of the things that you have to remember with transaction fees is that the guest has to either opt in themselves or you have to verbally ask them, and what happens when you do a bulk closeout, the transaction fees aren't passed on to the guest. So I will typically ask my clients to send the self-checkout message as soon as the auction closes or their fundraising ends and try to push that for, maybe an hour or two, really depends on your schedule, and then kind of have a set time where you decide that you're going to go ahead and run all cards just so you can try to make some of that transaction fee back.
I think that's beautifully said, Ala. And the one point I think that is great to say, and it looks like the screen got disconnected. Sorry about that. Is I think the ability to set it your own self is the main call out that I think is great, because some organizations, some events, 100 might be the threshold just based upon, hey, it's a smaller thing we're doing or something like that, versus some of my favorite moments are checkout. Somebody comes up, can you run my card? And it's a significant balance. And I'll always laugh like, we can, you tell me like if it's going to go through or not overall. And so I think, based upon, knowing your constituents and knowing the donors and what that comfortability is, always using, what works for you and over communication, which I think we have some good examples of as well, kind of into the future with it. And then kind of moving things forward here as we look at it, talking about closing people out, then the next step is great. You've paid for some stuff. Now we need to get it to you. And I think what is cool is there's so many nuances to it, but between Betty and Caitlin, they kind of cover two different perspectives of more kind of local and pickup based versus national and shipping considerations. So we flipped a coin and Caitlin went first. So Caitlin, kind of starting with you and talking about how shipping, has gone for your organization over the past year here, and what kind of things have worked well versus not in kind of the learnings that you all have had.
Yeah, definitely. So when we were in-person events and we had everyone in the room, the process that we used to do, obviously we didn't have to charge shipping. People were there to pick up their items. We would kind of have runners grab our auction items ahead of time, kind of lay out the items that I knew had bids on, and we're just able to check people out right there and then. And the way that our galas have worked and our events have worked, when we did the swap to virtual, we had items and we had participants from all over. So we didn't have the ability, like Betty will discuss in a little bit, to just kind of have people come and pick things up. So we had to incorporate shipping for our items. So what we did is we made the process abundantly clear to people. We had the steps and process on our main landing page of our GiveSmart platform. When we were sending out email communications for people to sign up for the event, post-event, again, the shipping descriptions and how to do everything was abundantly clear to everyone. We came up with a $7 flat shipping fee for any tangible items that we'd be sending. So these are your like gift baskets that people were winning, purses that we had, anything like that. We kind of averaged out the cost of what it would be. And we just came to that $7 number. But again, depending on the items that you have, that might need to be higher or lower. So that's something that you guys would just need to do on a case-by-case basis. And also what we have here, you'll see, is the shipping fee for consignment items. And I think that was a question that I kind of saw came through. Because our sports items were high dollar value items and things that were heavy in weight, like framed, autographs and such, they needed the higher consignment fee. And again, if you look on the main page of our website, it was abundantly clear that those would have a higher shipping fee. So at checkout, what we did was just kind of added those into people's totals, and then they covered the cost when it was for checkout. And the way, like I said, the way that we did it is we just added that into their final receipt before we ran the credit cards.
Mm-hmm. No, that is awesome. I think the spelling it out in as many places as you can, and I think the bolding in as many places as you can and as bold as you can make it. And I think doing it on the homepage, and we've seen people, I think even within the item, that this item is or isn't eligible, for shipping and stuff like that. I think the more you can put it out in front of people. And I'm curious to ask too, was there any opposition or resistance that any donors had of covering it? I'm just curious if that was something that people, hey, I'm here, I'm in Georgia, you're in New York, so yeah, it's got to get to me somehow. And people just kind of like expected it, or if it was, wait, what?
Yeah, I have to say, so again, we did it on a case-by-case basis. If it was a digital item, we obviously didn't charge them. If it was a certificate, that we could just kind of, send. But for the most part, kind of everyone was very understanding of it. Again, to your point, no one's going to make the drive to where I am in Connecticut to come pick up their items, because my home turned into the office where all of the items that used to live, they now lived in my basement. So in order for them to get that, we did have a couple local, like if we needed to do a local pickup in Connecticut, that could have been arranged, but most people were very comfortable just kind of covering the fee to get the items to them. And again, it was in all of our descriptions, we had it laid out. So going into purchasing the item, they knew that additional fee would be built in there.
Mm-hmm. And then, Ala, was there anything on the shipping side of stuff that you wanted to add in there?
Yeah, great. So I know that, for your organization, you all decided to do a $7 shipping charge per item, which is kind of a number that you guys looked in at a few factors, and that's kind of the number that your organization felt comfortable with. But I do want to remind everyone that there's flexibility in how you build out the shipping fee. So if you want to do it, say, by distance, weight, or, any other sort of factor, you can always put in any price on the back end as an instant item and add that in should you need to as well. And of course, I've even had some clients whose donors have offered to give them a shipping label to send out. So we definitely have the flexibility for you all to work with your guests for their items, whether it's like, it's free if you come pick it up, or if you want me to ship it across the country and it's very heavy, it's going to cost a little bit more. So just like you all were saying, you were very transparent about kind of the rules that you have for shipping out. And for the most part, if you tell someone in advance, they'll understand.
The Blind Side is a great movie, but it's a bad thing to have happen to you in real life. And I think, kind of juxtaposing the shipping side of things with more, picking it up. And I think building on the theme of over communication. And even as we were talking earlier about the auto close, where, better in this campaign here, being able to have the times very clearly articulated and that it was open for a week, I think is great stuff. But, could you talk through the logistics side? I think more than anything, over the past year has, for each organization, some people's basements became the place and other people had to do all sorts of things. But, I think the communication and blatancy, again, you guys did a great job of it. And so I'm curious, how the logistics more than anything, of coordinating and getting people, if that was insane or by and large, went pretty smoothly.
Well, ours was everyone had to pick up their items, and we had a pickup committee, which worked out. And because it was a pandemic, it made it difficult. We had to have distancing and things like that. So, but we have a gate on our facility, and we had it set up where someone's let in a gate and they stand at the bottom of the stairs. There might be someone then waiting at the top of the stairs, and then the table outside the door. They come up, they show their phone. Someone went and got their item, and then they just turned around and went down the back stairs and out the gate. So we kept distancing, and everything was set up and ready for them.
That was great. And I'm curious but I asked you, but Al or Caitlin, if you have a thought on it, feel free to add it. When things were exclusively in person, was pickup an option people had? So if I maybe had a little too much to drink and I took an Uber home and I won a huge teddy bear, I don't know why that's the example, and it couldn't fit in the car, was pickup of items something that was available pre-pandemic for people? Or was it night of, we're getting you everything and go? Or was this kind of just, we had to do what we had to do?
Well, we tried to keep it that they picked it up after the luncheon. It was usually, we have a luncheon, not an evening one. But sometimes, something wouldn't happen, an item would be left, and we just take it back to where our store is and contact them, and then they would have to come pick it up.
Yeah,
So
and we did the
try to
same
keep
thing
it
if
to that.
there was a handful of items that, again, to your point, someone had to depart early for some reason. We would just hold it at the office, and then, it was their responsibility to come pick it up.
But they're usually, in our case, they were ready. I mean, there was a long line. They wanted to get their items and get out of there because they buy a lot, and we'd have to get carts for them to carry their items out.
I think it's great. And I think the speed of which you guys figured it out and I think using the gate and things. And I know, but one of the things you talk about is the kind of that paid stamp of making the process a little bit smoother to verify that somebody has paid to it in the proof of payment. I think, again, the screenshot of the self-checkout that we're looking at, and in advance, people knowing exactly what it is and making it, I think, goes. And so, especially more in person, or where people are doing pickup, regardless of if the actual auction was online, this paid stamp has always been kind of what works. But I'm curious, if each of you kind of has best practices or things that you've seen work of, hey, we group, the auction closes at 10 and at 10:30 we open checkout. In that 30 minutes, we have people organizing the items or different things. Basically just kind of general best practices to both from a donor to make it seamless, but then internally to not be running around too crazy, whether it's pay slips or sticky notes or what sort of things, you all have seen work well to just make that process a little bit smooth, to verify you paid and then get you what you need.
Well, we never had any problem when it was in person. We still had all the items there on the table according to their categories, and people standing there, and the ones with their phone, they'd come up to that area and point out, this is what I won, and they would hand them their bag, And then if they had another area to go to, they would go to that other area.
So when we had in-person events, what we would do, similar to what you were saying, is kind of when we had that lull, when like our dinner presentation or our actual program was taking place, we would kind of start to break everything down. We would, as staff, kind of look at the items that had bids on them, so we knew someone would be purchasing them. Obviously, if you have a bid on it, at some point you're either going to be outbid or you're going to win that item. And the great thing is, you have to obviously number every item as you're putting it into their system, and we would label all of our items with a corresponding number. So we had a group of student volunteers that I would hand them an iPad, or they take an iPad or go with one of us, and we would start to pull all of the items throughout our area, bring them to the checkout table, categorize them by number, and then when we would check out at the end of the evening, we would have the people, our guests, come up to us and show us the screen on their phone. It had to say paid. Again, because if you run into the issue where a credit card may not process or what have you, they had to show us the paid sign. And then we would just have, the runners, what we called them, just grab them their items, and then they'd head out for the evening. In a virtual setting, it was a little bit easier because we had a little bit more time. Again, it was just myself or a coworker who had the items at our house. So, I would take my iPad downstairs and again, kind of do the same thing, pull all the wedding items, bring them upstairs, and then box them up, and then head to FedEx with my packaged boxes and ship them out. So virtual and in person both kind of have their advantage. When you're in person, you have help. When you're a virtual world, you're doing it on your own.
It's a very good point.
Patrick, one thing you said is, say the auction closes at 10, do we have checkout at 10:30? I will say that for the most part, as soon as the auction closes, checkout needs to be ready 15 minutes before that. So, one thing that I would recommend is, similar to some of the things you shared, is that you have a pay table and a pickup table. So everyone who's already paid can go directly to the pickup table, show that paid stamp. Your volunteers or staff can get those items together. It takes a few minutes, as long as all the items are organized. And then if anyone needs help checking out, they can go to the pay table. And I would definitely recommend whoever is there is walking them through how to do it on their phone, referring to the transaction fees, because they do either have to opt into it themselves, or you would have to check it off for them on the back end. So that's definitely something I would encourage. And of course, it keeps it a little bit more contactless at your event. So if we're empowering the guests to do it themselves, there's far less kind of like movement between people.
Right. When we were live, we did that, but we had actually GiveSmart people at the table. So as they came out of that bank room, there was 500 people or more. If they had a problem, they knew to go straight to that table. So they would be, and they helped them, do this, push that, on their phone, and then send them on to pickup. But the ones that do pickup, they were on their way.
Right. And some guests do, just wait for the organization to charge. So I think like kind of going back to the over communication, if you guys are hoping to get more guests to cover transaction fees, let them know in the self-checkout text, saying click here to pay, and please consider, covering the transaction fee so we can get 100% of your contribution. So definitely feel free to include that in some of your text communications that you may have not before. And you will see an increase in the amount of people that opt in.
That's great. And I know we were talking about it with the shipping, about tangible items versus a certificate or something like that. One of the more creative things I saw someone do is at the end of the item name, I forget what, they had a code internally that they knew that was like, I think it was just C or P for a certificate or a physical item. And so when a guest would come and they show their purchases, you see screen, it would say Apple iPad, and in parentheses have a P. So the checkout people knew, hey, wait, I need a physical thing versus a certificate that they all had. And so I think, over communicating externally is good, but I think sometimes too, even on the internal side of it, what are some of the little things that small pre-planning and preparation can help alleviate some of the things is good. And we'll kind of go back to everybody's face for talking about some of the kind of follow-up and communications and things. And I know one things we were talking about the other day is auction closes and things that didn't have a bid kind of in the system become immediately available for purchase. And so some organizations, hey, we'll use that for future things, or no, we'll discount the price and slash through. And Betty, I think, your guys' deal of the day, I think was a real cool way of kind of engaging people in doing things of that day. And I know, Caitlin, you guys do something a little different as well. So Betty, we'll start with you, kind of talk through the deal of the day that you guys do and kind of how that works for folks.
Well, this was the first time we had done it. And we thought, well, we've got all these items and they were purses, personal items and things that people really like. Because when we have the regular fundraiser, there's a regular room that has all these items that they can just purchase. They don't bid on them. So we thought we'd turn it into the deal of the day. And we'd have 5, 6 items and different times each day. Might be in the morning one day, the next day in the afternoon, and the following day at night. So that made it so they were waiting to see when was the deal of the day going to be. And it went over really, really big. And the last day, the deal of the day, it was all day, was a wine pool. And that was fantastic. The only thing that happened, there was several went to buy 1 or 2 bottles and end up maybe with 20 bottles. So then I was being contacted and I had to back it out and give Smart for them. So that was kind of interesting, but they knew who to contact and we got it taken care of.
Not surprising that of all the things that went all day, that people's willingness to purchase wine at any time of the day, especially given everything, was high. That's cool. And then Caitlin, I know you guys talk kind of I can't remember if it was you had said it's like a flash sale type thing that you'll do with some of that stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, so what we do is, very similar to a flash sale, but we'll go in, look at the items that have no bids. And what we do is we turn all of those into instant buy items. We'll go in, slash the price where we can. It depends on the item. But go in, slash prices, take off an extra $30, $40, $20, wherever we think we can. Again, like I said, turn them all to instant buy items. So there's no, no bidding war going on, and it's first come, first serve. And we mass communicate that. We were lucky because ours is a nationwide event. So we send it to our entire database. And again, with the shipping, that's where it comes in handy, is we can send it out to anyone. And we see a really good result. And, it kind of was, maybe someone was like watching an item, but didn't want to spend that much money, had already bid on a bunch of items and were, kind of hemming and hawing. This gets them back into the system. And again, it's another form of communication. We text everyone that we had into the system night of saying, hey, everyone, we're having a flash sale, go back in and look. So it's another form of communication and engagement with those individuals that were there into the system night of. And again, because we can mass communication to our entire database, getting more people into the GiveSmart system and onto our website to bid on auction items, make donations, or however we can get them involved while we have them there.
We kind of did the same thing, only we did our items that didn't sell, and it was at the end. We turned those to instant items. We didn't lower the price though. We left them at that same price, but they were instant items. And when they came to pick up, they were able to purchase those if they wanted to.
I'm curious on that front. Was that something when somebody would come to pick up? Did you put on your sales hat like ever to be like, hey, we do have some things if you got more space in the car? Like, I feel like that could be kind of fun, or that's an interesting.
Well, I didn't, but I'm sure all the gals there did it, and I know they did it with the wine because they were selling a lot of wine.
That's so funny.
That is awesome. And the I know a few of the other kind of in terms of communicating and kind of things at the end, a few of the other examples that sorry about that, the screen popped on the wrong one, that kind of we saw that kind of stuck out is we had one organization who did a survey, and I think for the same reasons of wait, we have the engagement, we've been driving traffic, how did we do is always, you can't get better if you don't know where some of those things are. I think was creative and tying a gift card to it Or, I think even if you did have something that didn't sell, that, making that the hook to do it. Or another organization who their thank you video, they just put as their homepage overall. And because they had in their communications driven all the traffic back, they were able to do it. And then, each email is going to be different. This one, I think what was cool is they put a link to their program overall, but then, hey, we're close to our goal and here's the link to make a gift. So I know the amount of time and effort it goes to getting it stood up and getting people there and engaged. And I think Caleb said it, that the more you can drive site traffic, the better. What is nice, we have a lot more follow-up and communication-based examples, which is my not even veiled attempt at a promotion of our kind of finale for this series, which will take place at the same time, at the same place next week, with 4 different organizations talking about some of the things that they'll do in terms of the follow-up and stuff of that nature. So we won't steal any of their thunder as we go. But I know we've had a few questions come in, and I'll throw the first one over to you, kind of talking about with the transaction fees, and if I bulk run cards, does that give me the ability, or kind of how that those two things tie together?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So that's a great question. So if you bulk charge the cards, we will not, the transaction fee will not automatically be passed on. It's something that the guest either needs to check off themselves or the admin needs to check off on the back end. So I think it's just like an internal conversation of like, do I want the convenience of like, just like closing out my event and having all the balances, or do I want to give a little bit more time to push this? So I'll typically see my clients like wait a few hours from the close of the auction to bulk charge all cards, or sometimes they'll even wait till the next day. But I'd say for the most part, one of the benefits of having GiftSmart is that it makes the checkout process so easy that you probably, want to charge it at the end of the night, just before you're kind of heading out, whether it's virtual or in person. But as long as you tell them why you're pushing transaction fees, they'll probably, try to do it.
That's great. I know we had a question too, talking about kind of consignment items and things of that nature. And I think the question was put up, sorry about that, is how would having consignment items with the higher price kind of factor into closing things out? And and just to clarify, for simple math, if something is going to cost the organization $1,000, making sure that the starting bid, making sure that starting bid is at whatever threshold that would guarantee the right amount of funds coming in to make it worthwhile would be, first and foremost, as well as on those items, making sure that if you do end up lowering the prices or something like that, that you have internally a red star that says, don't ever drop this because of that threshold. It's kind of always the stock best practice, but I didn't know if anybody else had any ideas in terms of handling consignment with price adjustments or anything to just to safeguard that we can add in. And then Betty and Caitlin, a question specifically whether it's closing an auction, getting people items, reconciliation, any just general learnings that, hey, over the past year we picked up this nugget and we're excited to take it with us, or just general best practices that, in your own experiences, you've seen people sometimes overlook, that if somebody's just entering the development space and trying to wrap their head around, what to do and how to help their organization, that you pass on to those folks.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, every event is different. You guys know your constituents better than anyone else. So what we've learned is the more that you use the mobile bidding software, like we were always able to track which items had like multiple bids, which items people were really into. So making sure that you're using the reporting feature that's available to you to see, again, which items have a lot of attendance, which items people are really into, and making sure that you're getting those items year after year or something similar to that. I can tell you one thing that we've learned shifting from in-person to virtual and hopefully back to in-person at the end of this year and moving forward is something we're doing instead of displaying all of our auction items like we have in the past. What we're going to do is we're going to highlight like 10, probably 10 to 15 of our top auction items and have those out in person for people to look at, but really start driving people to use the mobile bidding feature to see all of the auction items and to do all of that. And the reason for that is, again, to get them online, to get them comfortable with the software and system. And again, logistically on our end, so we don't have to kind of display and take up all of that valuable cocktail reception space or venue space like we have in the past. So that's something that we're hoping to move forward with when moving back to in-person events.
I like that idea. I might pick up on that one. Because we're always trying to find a room big enough to put all our items into. That's a very good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good one. But mainly, I think it's just getting everybody together and making sure that there's an understandable, when we're setting up for the fundraiser. I mean, sometimes it's, oh, it's another meeting, but it's very important to make sure we have all that information together so it flows to the end and is perfect.
Yeah, and making sure night of you guys are utilizing that reports feature and tab on, if you have an iPad night of. It's real-time updates, which I know I love personally. So walking out of my event, I'm like, yes, I've hit goal or exceeded goal on, my auction, my fund the mission, my donations. Being able to just have a real-time update is very comforting and exciting. So definitely make sure you're using those features. Text messaging is great. So you can send the mass communication that would have, taken you a large amount of time to get back on your computer and send emails. You can mass communicate thank yous to your constituents and participants for the evening, and just things like that. So just make sure you're utilizing all the features that are available to you, because there are quite a lot that make your life a lot easier and nicer for wrapping up and, night of flow.
And yes, we also, 4 days after, we always have a survey that goes out, because that's very important. We want to hear what they have to say about it, because we use all that information for the next fundraiser.
Oh, that's perfect. I know, talking to Kayla, your point about displaying only a certain amount of items and driving traffic to the site and having kind of the rest of them there. But I thought you had mentioned something with, you guys did something with like putting videos or something for some of the items that you had that were of a higher price. Which I think is a good point where, you have some tools and stuff. So you can touch on kind of what you guys did for that.
We have a very, very good marketing department. And for our super silent auction, and if it was a live thing, that would be a live auction. We had videos that were made up that displayed, what the super silent was auctioned about. And we had a $3,000 necklace that was on a turntable that rotated so they could see it. So that went over really big. And we also had videos of our president talking about our chapter. We had past president talking about the history of the Assistance League. And the main thing, our big one, is Operation School Bell. That's our big philanthropy. And we had the person that's in charge of that speak. So, and then we always have a lot of pictures of the kids and everything for Operation School Bell that are also involved. So yeah, we had a lot that was visible for them to see, and they could click on it anytime they wanted.
No, that was great. I think, yeah, giving people more versus less is a good thing in this regard. And I know, looking at time, that flew by and was a lot of fun. And Ala, Betty, Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us here today and building on the survey comment. Similar to Betty and her team, at the end of this, you all listening will see a survey, and if you can fill it out to let us know, because that feedback is what drives our content, to make sure that we're hitting the right things with that. So with that, thanks to all of you for listening, but most importantly, Ala, Betty, and Caitlin, thanks so much for joining us, as well as the things that you guys have done over the past year. I think are pretty impressive, and the small things matter a great amount, and you all have done it quite well.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.